So, good morning, everybody. We first, of course, like to thank to Emilio and Rodrigo the invitation to be part of this third Porto Academy. It's clearly an honor to be part of a group like the one we have this year, and especially for me, I guess for both, but especially for me, coming back to the school where I've studied, it's clearly an honor to be here. And I guess this moment would be relevant, I would say, in your process of trying to find your way through architecture. So, hope you will enjoy. We will first present a house that we did in the Azores a couple of years ago, and I guess it's relevant to start with Pico, which is an island placed in the middle of the Atlantic, because in a way that's where we started our work, our partnership, let's say, and I guess it's defined in some way the way we still see and work in architecture today. It was a very rural context. The island has like 15,000 inhabitants. And there were no architects working as architects when we arrived, so we were the two architects. And we went to this island to make us a very special work, which was in a governmental office to not run, but be part of an office that was trying to approve a candidature of a part of the island to a World Heritage Site. Finally, after these 2 years, this was approved. It was a very important step also for the island. And this just is important because all these 2 years that we were living here, it was clearly a process of trying to understand the territory that we were trying to protect. And we still work for Pico these days, and I hope we will continue. And I guess the fact that we work in a way limited context, where we keep doing different projects of different scales with different programs, it's like a continuous search of understanding and going deep in the understanding of this place, which is something that we clearly want to achieve, this understanding. And our project, the house, I would not simplify, but synthesize, saying that we would like it to belong to this place that we were trying to understand, and how could completely artificial object and new object could be part of this so strong context that was this island. So one of the things was that the plot was not so relevant in terms of size and limit, because the client was trying to bought other pieces of land just to gain more privacy. So clearly the project was not about creating a condition to the house, but more finding the way the house would be placed in the site to make it belong to it. Another important thing was that already the client had the idea where to put the house, because it was the highest point. We see somehow that the site has a gentle slope, and here it's a little bit stronger, and it was where the client wanted to put the house because of the view. And immediately there was the question of the access, and as the client had a previous house placed more or less here, we immediately designed we started the project by thinking that the access was a very important issue, and that we could, in a way, try to hide or avoid the obvious direct access to the house, and try to make like a path of discovering and hiding the house. It was determined for the project, the brief that the client gave us. As I said, he had a previous house that was built like 20 years ago. And they are both dentists, which is also relevant because they work with a scale of detail that we can never imagine, of microns, and so it's. And for them, it was very painful to have a construction made by local contractors. There's no culture of construction in this island, so they have built a house like 20 years ago, and they wanted to now build a house that was somehow prefabricated, if possible, that was brought by boat to the island and had no contact with the local contractors. We made a first investigation. I would ask you after, I will show you after what was the final result, but actually the most important thing was to realize that even if we had parts that could come by boat to this island, there was always the point where these structures touches the ground, and this had to be done by local contractors, so it was a fourth question actually. But the idea of the containers were always present on the project. So starting this idea of the containers, and at the same time the place which had a huge slope, immediately the house gained like two faces. One where the containers actually go inside the site, and the other where there's a balcony that connects these containers, and that makes, in a way, the image and gives like a unit to the whole building. And so this is more or less the idea of the containers. But moving from this forward, as we had lived in the island and we had this strong experience of the elements, we are completely on the middle of the ocean. We can have winds that go till 200 square kilometers per hour, is something very, very strong. And an interesting thing was that people around the islands know how to deal with this question of the elements. And for instance, when there's a strong wind coming from the north, people, for instance, for fish, can always walk around the island and find a nice, calm bay that will be protected even if there's a strong wind coming from the other side. So we propose to our clients that we would build their containers, but actually that the social space of the house would be the central area, and that this central area could be open towards the four sides according to the relevant wind. So actually it was an idea of being protected and being connected to the exterior, and this was the way we deal with this idea of the containers. But as I said before, it was very important for us that in a way the house belonged to that place, and it was interesting for us, and we had all this in mind when we were drawing the plan, that traditionally old constructions were, by technical reasons and functional reasons, displayed around like a street. They are always small constructions that, although they are in a completely rural context, the way they are arranged make almost like a small urban system. With a street, they even call streets to this in between spaces, and there's functional rooms apart from others, but the whole amount of the buildings make an ensemble that makes us like I said, a very coherent and almost like urban structure. So not so relevant the plan, but it's like putting in a concrete way what we propose to the client. So the social area inside, the rooms for the kids, the main room, and the kitchen. Also an office that was important, as he was dentist, and normally people, the wife said that normally people would come, as the island is very small, People would knock on their door to have a small appointment even when they were at home. So the idea was that the office was more close to the entrance, that people, if would come to the house, didn't enter their privacy. This is just to show you what was finally from our research, the possible prefabrication system, which was like a light steel framing. This was very actually good for the project because it allowed us a kind of detail of a degree of detail that it was in a way closer to the one with the type dentist works. So it was really possible to make the size of the volumes very exact. And finally, all the torsions and all the movements that the buildings have are related to somehow the views that the client asked for each compartment. There was this kid that wanted to have his view towards the mountain, the other that wants to see the sea. The wife wanted to see particularly a special part of the island, and all the movements that you see on the plan are actually trying to respond to this will of the client. And I guess the interesting thing on this picture is mainly the fact that even if you have this prefabricated structure, which is light and dry, you have always the hard part that is touching the ground. And I guess for us it's totally relevant the way the buildings touch the ground. I guess it's the way that defines them in contexts like this. The other part of the brief that was relevant was that they wanted the house to be made in wood. And from our knowledge of the local construction, wood is always connected to more functional buildings and that normally store goods and not so much in houses. So we were a little bit afraid that the wood would give a sense of lightness to the project that was not at all the reference we had to this building. So we proposed to the clients to paint with a veneer, a black opaque veneer, the wood. And this wood also had this idea that the volumes are, So this also added to the idea that the volumes could be seen outside and inside like a continuous element, and that actually the glass that is missing here and that is inside the wall, it's not so relevant. And of course, this decision of having openings for the four directions would also give us very different relations towards the exterior, either because of what we see or because of our distance to the ground. This is the balcony, which is a very relevant element in the traditional construction because we used to say, I don't know if this is a right reading of the territory, but we used to say at least this is a volcanic island and it's a very recent juvenile one, so it means that that's no big process of erosion. So I guess the whole process of the construction of the island is based on an eruption and the slowly flowing of the lava. So I guess we would always have a slight or more strong slope, but we will always have a slope. So for us to inhabit this place, we always have to make a flat platform. And I guess that's why the balconies are always something very relevant, because it's this act of producing a flat place to occupy. And once again, this trying to use this continuity in an intensive way to the interior spaces. So this would be like the entrance and the office, allowing this more quick connection to the office. And for instance, the side facing south, where you don't have any kind of balcony, because actually the volumes are completely inside the terrain. But clearly for us it was important that the house was not seen as 4 elements in an interior space, so I will repeat that the element of the balcony was very relevant to give to the whole project a sense of a unique building. For the interior space, we had the chance to, with the client, choose also the furniture. It was interesting because mainly it's because it was all a process of understanding of knowledge with the client, and it was very interesting for us that suddenly it was the client that was asking even for more, and not us that were pushing the project. It was their understanding of the project that was pushing actually all these decisions and trying to find in this, in a way, very direct idea of the inside and outside of the volumes, in between spaces, where we felt it was needed some kind of controlled scale, for instance, the dining room or the office space, where you go inside the volume, but more related with the social area. Once again, the different connection to the exterior. And finally, the most important view, which was from the Pico top, this highest point of Portugal. Now we will go back to our place of living and where we have our office. This is Tubal, where we live, and we were asked by the city council in 2011, I guess, to visit an existing building in this place, because they had the idea of building a museum. I guess it was not a sea museum, but something related to the sea. And at that point, it was just a visit and an intention of the city hall to make this building. And actually, what we did at that moment was like just a memorandum, a document, saying to the city council that we don't totally agree with the idea of the museum in a place like this. We think it's a missed opportunity because this is a very strong place where actually we'll go back just where the hill, the mountain of Arrábida meets the city, and clearly where the sea and the river are most closely connected with the city and the hill. And we thought it was a very strange place because it's very public. There's this part of a promenade that connects the city with a urban park. It was very strange to make a museum in this place. So we just proposed to the city, why not think about a building that were more connected with the sea, more like an infrastructure that could use the pre-existing harbor, not an harbor, but the this anchor that could reuse this element. And we proposed like a multi-purpose building, more connected with sports related with water, that could have some cultural part, but that the goal of the building was not the culture because of all the economical problems that it brings, but mostly that could be an infrastructure to the future use of the city and to the citizens. So for this place, we had a very not so good urban planning made very quickly, I guess, that gave us 2 plots, but there was no sense of urban planning really on this planning, at least for us. So we start our work by trying to understand the place where we were working. So we made some diagrams that tried to express to the city what was our view to this side. So what we see here, it's a diagram that represents in these red lines the different coastal lines through the years since the first occupations of the city in this hill and after in this valley. And all these red lines are the different lines of coast through the years. And we see here the last one, a very strong line, which was made in the 30s. Actually, we tried to identify the main elements. So we had this, the medieval walls, the walls from the 17th century, the railway, this very strong line of the 30s. And actually, one of the other main elements was how do we call it? It's a public promenade that was drawn in the late 19th century. That actually was a really relevant element to the city because it was in a way trying to solve the voids and the greed of the medieval occupation and trying to define some new lines of growth to the possible new city. So this element was very strong, but actually what happened when in the 30s there was this new line of coast that built like a totally new white canvas for the city, was that the new buildings that appeared here were totally connected with this line and had no connection with the previous structure that the avenue had started. So finally what we said to the city is that we should see all this line as a new possible avenue that has to solve and deal with these two realities, the one that was left by the avenue and the one that was created by this element. So after saying this, we realized, or we tried to defend, that actually this place could be very relevant because it was in the limit of this important line, and we have here the ferries to go to the peninsula just in front, and we could have here also a new enter or a starting point to the city, an arrival or a departure point to the city in the opposite way, and also defending possible connections to high points. As we said before, there's two hills on each side. In a more close view, what we realized that we were already in a context on this part of the city of many landscape designer projects. So we were more like inside the park than inside a plot grid or like a block structure in the middle of the city. We were more like a building in the park than a building belonging to a structure of the city. So actually what we tried to propose is that a building that departed from the idea of the two plots that were given by this regulation, that what we could do is trying to make a unique building that, although it was divided in two on the ground floor, it had an upper floor that would connect them, being just a unique element that could, in a way, give a public square, covered square, to emphasize the strongness of this point where the hill meets the water and the city. You see here how strong is the side. Also the coastal is a very unique element that we have to clearly respect and not fight against. And of course the port as another main element. So we tried that the structure of the building was already somehow its solution in terms of program, and this section just shows how strength is this slope and this moment where the water meets the hill. And actually, this is not so clear, but we have a two heights open square towards the mountain, and a one-story height covered square towards the sea. And in a way, the building tries to play with this tension between the two spaces. This is a not so beautiful plan, but I guess it's interesting for us to show us because it's the meat of the process. It's not anymore the diagram that we presented to the clients in the beginning, and it's not yet the final result. So we are in a moment where we still see what was the starting point of the project. So it was like 4 walls that divide parts of the program, and at the same time with an interior core connect all these parts of the program. But at the same time, there's so many information, there's so many problems to solve here that we realize that the plan is a little bit strange. And I guess all the process of drawing, at least for us, is with the process of refinement, trying to test if the first diagrammatical ideas were right and how they can be strengthened by the process of refinement and decision of a scale of a compartment, of the detailing of a window. That's why I would say it's so important. Finally, in terms of program, this was what we call the terminal. So it would be the place where you could have all kinds of information about what's around in terms of activities, sports, and leisure activities on the mountain and also on the sea, like bird watching or seeing dolphins, because we have a wonderful bay, one of the unique cities in Europe where there's dolphins to see. So this will be like a counter where you could have all these sorts of informations, room for boats that you could in a way rent, a diving room also, and some service areas that were to be shared. And this was one important part of the project, that all this infrastructure had to be shared about the different components of the program. And this would be like the central square. The upper floor with the remaining of the cultural program, which will be like an exhibition room just in the middle of the building. And once again, the idea of the 4 walls that both divide and connect the project. A very rough image of the first presentation, where we just can feel a little bit the intentions of the project. So the 2 height square, the compressed space looking to the other side, the stairs that could be in a way an informal auditorium, a possible projection of movies in the exterior, and the main room, which was the remaining of the cultural program in the center point of the project. And once again, a rough image of what was the idea. And I guess all the process of drawing from this early image into the construction drawings will be a process of trying to test if there was, if it's right, this idea of building, and how can the details reinforce this first impression.
Coming back to Pico Island in Azores, this is one house that we finished last year. and it's also in the north coast of the island. But Cise House, the first house, was a permanent house, but this one is a holiday house. So it was a couple from the mainland that bought this ruin, which is a very small one, a very small ruin. It was a rural house, and they wanted to transform it to spend some days in Pico during the year. So when we arrived there, well, they were pretty much in love by this ruin and by the aspect of the walls in stone. But of course, we know that once we start transforming or intervening in these pre-existences, all this aspect, all this atmosphere will change. So somehow we were quite interested about thinking, how could we leave this atmosphere, how could we deal with this stone wall, with this ruin, not being very frightened of it, and at the same time taking profit from it to draw a house. So we had the house in the first floor and the kitchen. It is a quite usual typology in rural housing in Pico. And in the ground floor, there was the house for animals, let's say. And somehow we started thinking that we could really use this ruin trying to make some new spaces, and even if the ruin was small, trying to have some exterior spaces in this ruin so that we could bring more lights in, but also so that we could create some speciality, new speciality in this old and very, very small and tiny house. So in some way, always the slope, like Miguel was saying, it's really something strong, the slope that pushes towards the sea, let's say, like that. And you really feel like your intention, you're in a very radical and strong place. And somehow we always approached, when the ruin was like a ruin, we always approached the side from above. So we always went through the vegetation to this cistern, and then from this cistern we really could see all the ruin and spend there with the clients many times looking to it and wondering how it could really work. So that's why somehow we really, in the end, put a wood ceiling in here, because the house, it's all opening towards north, and it was a way of people being able to profit from south light and being there in the deck, having some sun. But the normal access, it's from downstairs. So when you arrive, you have the balcony. So these are elements that are quite present in our vocabulary since we work in these islands. So trying really to understand how it was done, because it really gives you information about the scale, the proportions, the meaning of constructing there. And this is really how we left the house, with the main facade, so the entrance, the balcony, but then the balcony gives towards this narrow space that somehow allows you to have a different perspective from the exterior before getting into the interior of the house. Somehow we were quite interested about this game, or this wonderful opportunity to deal with a pre-existent house, not a very important house in terms of heritage or a typology, but somehow it was a matter of texture, of atmosphere, that we wanted to recreate and to add something to it. So the new volumes that we constructed are all in concrete and woods. And this is the small detail of the entrance through the kitchen, where we really have this dichotomy between the old, the new, but really not wanting to separate them. It's really, we started with the ruin, and then, as Miguel was saying, we have this idea, and at each step we try to test if it really makes sense, and we add information. At each moment, we try to find some answers that finally give a final result that makes sense to each place. So here we can really see the plan with the old, it was the entrance, and then you had 2 rooms, and then you had the kitchen that usually, wow, sorry, that usually was separated from the main room or from the bedrooms because of a fire, because of all the problems and the fragility of old houses. And somehow we kept the old oven because the client really wanted to have an old oven to make bread and to make pizzas. But instead of using the pre-existence limits, we really make the kitchen and the dining room parallel to the living room, so that we could have light coming through south, and putting here in the ground floor some 2 bedrooms, we could create a platform. So somehow we were starting with a logic of some kind of boxes that we were trying to fit in the ruin, and trying to understand how it could deal with the pre-existence. That's an image of the volume of the kitchen and the bedroom and the dining room, and this is an image of the living room, where we really feel what we really wanted to achieve in a way, which is the surprise. So we always are trying in an abstract way to make architecture become concrete in a way, not material, but become reality. And but we are always surprised by the result, actually. And so we really feel that we have to be flexible in the process, so that all the information and all that we weren't expected to happen can really enrich the process, and finally, and hopefully, the final result. So we weren't not very interested about having a very direct alignment between the new openings and the old ones. We are much more interested about the tensions and the not obvious point of views that we could create in such a small space, really having the possibility to make it bigger because of the crossing views, because of the profundity of the visual profundity that we could create through the spaces. So this is the living room, and here you see the exterior through the kitchen. And always trying really to find these connections between the exterior again, but with this richness of spatiality. So, for example, here, a very small move in a way that the whole ruin has just 2 windows, and as the ground floor was for animals, the height was not very tall. So as we increased a bit the height of this ground floor, suddenly when you're seated, you can really look through the window and see the view. So these are all small relations, small things that you do once you're in the project. And you can really only find them if you know the place, where you're working in, and if you have a kind of, intimacy with the place, knowledge of the place, and also if you have a client that together with you really wants to share the process and wants finally to share the space, because the space finally it will be theirs. So here we can feel, the oven that we were talking about, and somehow this platform, this flat platform that we are talking about, that gives us serenity and some protection to really feel the exterior space, because well, in the traditional houses, there was not such a thing like contemplation. Everything was much more functional. So it is quite beautiful to imagine that we are adding, we are overlapping a layer of somehow a new way of using a house than the pre-existent. So in the ground floor again, trying always to use the space to put some bedrooms. And in the ground floor, we used the local wood so that it could be much more warm, always solving the whole details, of course. But actually, what was interesting was to have all this surprise. So you go downstairs, and suddenly when you open the door, you find again the ruin, and you have all these different relations between these different but very, in the same time, very similar materials, because are really woods, stone, and concrete. And trying with the simple movements, with the simple gestures, really talk about space, about depth, about lights. And here it's just because actually it was the final surprise in the building, which was his more contemporary facade in a way. And somehow this makes us think about the materiality of this building. And Paulo Catrica, the Portuguese photographer that photographed this building, the first images that he sent to us was this diptych with the stone and the concrete. And for us, it's like a synthesis of this project. So a project that can age well, two really different materials that can age together, that can age well, even if one it was already there, one has just arrived in a way, but we really can, with different moments in the same place, really can add always new looks, thinking how we can do it with some poetry and not only talking about construction. And finally, just to finish, and like more or less a synthesis of what we have shown you and the houses that we've shown you in Pico, we think that that's why the Portuguese curator of the last Venice Biennale invited us to work on the issue of the detached house together with Susana Ventura and the photographer Paulo Catrica. So Pedro Campos Costa thought about a newspaper that was in Venice giving some information about what was happening in Portugal, and somehow he asked us to think about the detached house. And well, detached houses and relating it with the municipality and trying to find finally a client. So it was a quite difficult combination for beginning a project. But the thing was that we had to find a way of connecting a thought about detached house and working together with the municipality. And so the first thing was to choose a place where to work, and as Miguel already has shown you, Setúbal, it is in the middle of, well, the estuary, the river, a peninsula, Troia Peninsula, and a hill, a very beautiful one. So the first thing was to try to study and find examples of detached houses in this territory, and beginning by this one of Raul Lino from 1903, a Portuguese architect, a very important one for all the process of the 20th century history of Portuguese architecture, and which is a very beautiful example of a detached house with a very strong relation with the landscape. The second one was from an architect named Eduardo Anaori, which was all built in wood, like a prefabrication system. And it really was an interesting example, one of the first of prefabrication. And this relation with the exterior, it's a really beautiful and unique one. It was demolished in the 70s. It is the house in Galapos, it's the name of the beach, and it's from the 60s. This is the plan, a very simple one, but very beautiful. There was a house from Silva Vieira that was never built, but it's from the hot period of Portugal, this 1974. A house of Eduardo Sotomor, I'm sure you will know this example, and from 2002. But these all are holiday houses. So this one is already a ruin, but a very beautiful one from Aires Mateus, even before it's been done. So finished. So it was interrupted during the construction, and it's really a very beautiful ruin, let's say. We hope that it's finished, but it's from 2002. So having in mind these examples, we thought, how could we deal with this idea and work with the municipality? So we asked ourselves, is there places inside the city where we still could have some houses that somehow could solve urban problems, and not only being like detached in the landscape, but having all these qualities inside the city and really getting back to the city, because they really are solving some problems that in any other way couldn't be solved. For example, we choose here an old quarry, an old fort, a private house, a private site where in this particular one, there was a military pre-existent, and the client has already tried for several times to make a hotel there, and it is not possible, because it's not possible to densify such sensitive, sensible places like these ones. There's another one by the cemetery that I will show you, and an old fort. So somehow we started by designing a map of places of intimacy, like we call them, places that only with a very close regard, with a very close relation with the territory, you could find. And if you think in your own cities, maybe you could find some. Of course, the topography is something really important. So you give back to the city when you build a private program like this in these places, because you're really solving a problem that's it's really complicated, sometimes because of the accesses, other times because of the topography, but also because these points are really relevant in terms of views. So if you really solve these problems, you're really solving the city problem in a way. So this was an example of the old quarry that I told you, and somehow we were very much interested about representing these places in a way, like here the pre-existence in axonometry, and here is a section of the place. So it was a quite sensitive map. It's not, it has different scales. So it was a way more of representing a place with all the things that were important to us, like to analyze a place before starting designing it. Pedro Campos Costa asked us somehow to work on typology, to design some houses to this newspaper. And we said to him that we preferred to choose like intimacy as a subject to think about the house and really relate it to the territory. So intimacy in architecture, in a house, from the territory to a room, how it could be. So Paulo Catrica photographed, and it's like how to see a place always connecting from the interior to the city, and really with a look of intimacy in each one of the places, trying to retain the most important characteristics in each one of them, so then you could really feel that you can design a house in these places. So an old fort, And you would be surprised when you find these places, and you really cannot imagine another program in these places, because they are so sensitive. This one, it's really connected with the last one, the quarry, and you feel like you're in the nature, but you have a social housing program just right next to it. So in this one, it's the same thing, like viewing the city from the interior of a plot that the client carefully planted through the years, all the trees. These the fourth site, which is pretty much related with the landscape and inside the city, and also with this industrial character. And the last one, an old fort, which is really in the entrance of the city, that relates to the city again, and that could allow us to think how this idea of intimacy could be related from the compartment to the territory. So after finding these places and not wanting to design a house, because we really didn't want to get in that exercise, we really asked ourselves how this intimacy issue could be really related to the house, and we tried to find in our latest examples of domestic housing. This is the plan of the Sintra National Palace, a very beautiful one that has different periods. And here in the last one from Dom Manuel in the beginning of the 16th century, you really can understand this logic of the big room where everyone come in, and then there's this increasing of intimacy each time that you move to the antechamber, the chamber, which would be the bedroom, and the transchamber, which would be the place that you wouldn't, this is a latest opening, you wouldn't live here for anywhere else. So it is really the last place of intimacy. So we thought that it would be a very interesting way of working, and this issue of detached house, really making a proposal thinking about the territory, and then just designing a space of intimacy. And so we choose the fortress that had somehow a pre-existent rhythm and spaces that could allow us then to think about this space of intimacy, which would be actually just a pretext to design a space that we say that a space that could be used for every function or none of them. So just think about how you, after crossing all the house, how could you really enter from the first floor and have a space that doesn't have any connection with the views, and then have a ramp that could lead you to a downstairs space where you really looked and have some relations with the landscape, trying to understand the fine proportion of each space, of each window, and not being able to leave this space. So somehow this is how we finished, really thinking that it is very important, this look of intimacy, either when you look to the territory or either when you're working in a compartment, and really trying to understand each place or each time in the program, what are the very important particularities of each one. And so in this Porto Academy, we are really, with our students, designing our places, map of places of intimacy in Porto, and then each one of them will be able to design their own space of intimacy. Thank you.